Hello, my brilliant students. Welcome to our channel, Learn English with Clara. Today we are going to talk about two small words that quietly control almost every decision you make: needs and wants. They sound simple, almost too simple to make an entire video about. But listen carefully, because most people, without even realizing it, confuse these two words constantly, and that confusion quietly shapes their money, their happiness, and even their sense of who they are. Another important truth is this: you were not born confused about this difference. As a small child, the difference between a need and a want was actually very clear. Food, water, safety, love, these were needs. A toy in a shop window, that was a want. But somewhere between childhood and adulthood, marketing, comparison, and habit slowly blurred that line, until many people can no longer easily tell the two apart. Think about this carefully before we even begin. How many things in your home right now did you buy because you genuinely needed them? And how many did you buy because, somewhere along the way, they started to feel like needs, even though they never really were? Take a moment and get ready, because today we are going to use real psychology, real history, and real research to rebuild a clear, honest line between these two words. And once that line becomes clear again, something powerful happens. You start making decisions with your own mind, instead of decisions the world quietly made for you. Lesson 1. What a real need actually is. Let us start with real science, because need is not just an everyday word. It is also a term psychologists have studied seriously. In 1943, a psychologist named Abraham Maslow published a paper called A Theory of Human Motivation. And inside it, he described something that later became one of the most famous ideas in all of psychology. Listen carefully. Maslow proposed that human needs exist in a kind of order, a hierarchy. First come physiological needs, things like food, water, sleep, and basic health. Once those are reasonably met, safety needs emerge: shelter, security, stability. After that comes the need for love and belonging, real relationships and connection with other people. Then comes esteem, respect, achievement, a sense of your own worth. And finally, at the top, what Maslow called self-actualization, becoming the fullest, most authentic version of yourself. Another important truth is this, and it often surprises people. Maslow himself never actually drew his famous idea as a pyramid. That pyramid image, the one you have probably seen in textbooks and online articles 100 times, was created later by other people trying to simplify his work visually. Maslow's real point was more nuanced. These needs are connected, and a need lower on the list generally has to be reasonably satisfied before the next one becomes truly urgent. Think about this carefully, because here's the important lesson for today. According to this research, a genuine need is something your basic survival, safety, or fundamental well-being actually depends on. Food is a need. A specific, expensive brand of food is usually a want. Shelter is a need. A much bigger house than you actually require is usually a want. Clothing is a need. An entire wardrobe of items you rarely wear is usually a want. Another dangerous thing many people do is this. They stretch the definition of need further and further until almost everything they desire gets mentally relabeled as something essential. I need the newest phone. I need this vacation. I need these shoes. Listen honestly to yourself for a moment. Genuine needs are actually a fairly short, stable list. Wants are the much longer, constantly changing list sitting on top of them. Take a moment and think about your own life using Maslow's real categories. Are your basic physiological and safety needs actually met right now? For many people watching this video, the honest answer is yes. And if that is true for you too, it is worth sitting with an important, humbling thought. Most of what fills your daily stress and daily shopping lists is not survival. It is want, dressed up convincingly as need. Remember this carefully, because we will return to this idea throughout the entire video. A real need is something your life or well-being genuinely depends on. A want is something that would be nice, pleasant, or exciting to have, but that your life does not actually require. Keeping that honest line clear in your mind is where real financial and emotional clarity begins. Lesson 2. How wants get disguised as needs. Now let us talk about something uncomfortable but important. Much of the confusion between needs and wants is not accidental. For nearly a century, it has been carefully, deliberately engineered. Listen carefully to this piece of real history. In the early 20th century, a man named Edward Bernays, who happened to be Sigmund Freud's nephew, became one of the founding figures of modern advertising. Bernays understood something powerful, that people do not always make purchasing decisions logically, based on genuine need. Often, they make decisions emotionally, based on feelings, identity, and unconscious desire. Another important truth is this, and it comes directly from the business world of that time. A financier named Paul Mazur wrote something remarkably honest about this shift back in the 1920s. He wrote that America needed to shift from what he called a needs culture to a desires culture. People needed to be trained, in his own words, to want new things, even before the old things had been fully used up. This was not an accident of culture. It was a deliberate business strategy. Think about this carefully with real examples from history. Bernays famously helped convince American women to start smoking cigarettes publicly by branding them as torches of freedom, turning a simple product into a symbol of independence and identity. He also helped popularize the idea of a hearty breakfast of bacon and eggs by quietly getting doctors to publicly recommend it, boosting sales for the companies that hired him. In both cases, notice what actually happened. A want was carefully, intentionally reframed to feel like something closer to a need, a symbol of freedom, a symbol of health, a symbol of belonging. Another dangerous thing to understand is this. This same basic strategy continues today, just with more sophisticated tools. Advertisements rarely say simply, "Here is a product." They say, "Here is who you could become." They connect products to identity, status, love, security, and belonging. The very same deep human needs Maslow described decades earlier. This is precisely why a phone, a car, or a pair of shoes can start to feel like something you desperately need, even though, honestly, your survival was never actually connected to that specific brand or item. Take a moment and think about a recent purchase that felt urgent and important in the moment. Now ask yourself honestly, was that feeling connected to a genuine need? Or was it connected to an emotion, excitement, status, comparison, fear of missing out, that had been carefully triggered by clever marketing? Remember this carefully. Understanding this history does not mean every want is bad or that every business is dishonest. It simply means you deserve to make that decision with open eyes, understanding clearly when a feeling of need has been deliberately manufactured rather than genuinely arising from your actual life circumstances. Lesson 3. The comparison trap. Here is another powerful force that blurs the line between needs and wants, and it does not come from advertising at all. It comes from other people, specifically from comparing yourself to them. Listen carefully. In 1954, a psychologist named Leon Festinger introduced something called social comparison theory. His central idea was simple but profound. When people do not have a clear, objective way to measure their own abilities, success, or worth, they naturally turn to other people as their measuring stick instead. We compare our homes, our cars, our clothes, our careers, our lives to the people around us, often without even realizing we are doing it. Another important truth is this. This exact psychological tendency is where the old phrase, keeping up with the Joneses, comes from. The idea of constantly trying to match or beat your neighbors materially. Someone buys a new car, and suddenly your own perfectly functional car starts to feel inadequate. Not because anything about your actual car changed, but because your point of comparison did. Think about this carefully, because researchers have identified two different directions this comparison can take. Upward comparison means comparing yourself to people who seem to have more, wealthier, more successful, more accomplished. This often creates a feeling of lacking, of falling behind, even when your actual life circumstances have not changed at all. Downward comparison means comparing yourself to people who have less, which can sometimes create gratitude, though it can also become an unhealthy habit of its own. Another dangerous thing about our modern world is this. Social media has taken this ancient psychological tendency and placed it on constant repeat, all day, every day. 100 years ago, you compared your life to a handful of neighbors. Today, you can compare your life to thousands of curated, carefully selected highlight moments from people all around the entire world, every single time you open your phone. This creates an almost endless stream of new wants that quietly begin to feel like things you are missing, things you need, simply because someone else seems to already have them. Take a moment and think honestly about your own recent wants. How many of them arrived in your mind right after you saw someone else with that item, that vacation, that lifestyle? Not all wants come from comparison, but far more come from it than most people realize or comfortably admit. Remember this carefully. Comparison itself is not automatically dangerous. It is a completely normal part of being human, wired into us for a very long time. But when comparison becomes the main engine deciding what you believe you need, your choices stop being genuinely yours. They quietly become a constant, exhausting reaction to whatever everyone else around you happens to be doing. Lesson 4. The happiness treadmill. Now let us talk about one of the most important and most surprising pieces of research connected to this entire topic. It explains something almost everyone has experienced personally, but rarely has a clear name for. Listen carefully to this famous study. In 1978, researchers named Philip Brickman, Dan Coates, and Ronnie Janoff-Bullman studied two very different groups of people. Major lottery winners, people whose lives had suddenly changed with enormous, unexpected wealth, and people who had recently become paraplegic after serious accidents, people whose lives had suddenly changed through devastating loss. Another important truth is this, and it genuinely surprised many people when it was first published. About a year after these major life events, the lottery winners were only slightly happier, on average, than a comparison group of ordinary people. And the accident survivors, while certainly facing real, serious challenges, were not nearly as devastated in their reported daily happiness as most people would predictably assume. Both groups, remarkably, had drifted back significantly toward roughly their original baseline level of happiness. Think about this carefully, because this research gave us a powerful concept, sometimes called the hedonic treadmill. The basic idea is this. Human beings tend to adapt, psychologically, to almost any new circumstance, good or difficult, faster than we expect. You get the new house, the new job, the new relationship, and for a while it feels wonderful, genuinely exciting. But then, gradually, your expectations quietly rise to match your new circumstances. And that same excited feeling slowly fades back toward whatever your normal baseline happiness already was. Another dangerous thing this creates is this. If satisfaction from getting a want fades this quickly, but the underlying feeling that pushed you to want it, comparison, marketing, a sense of lacking something, remains unchanged, you end up needing another purchase, another achievement, another thing, just to recreate that same temporary feeling again. This is precisely why buying more things rarely creates lasting happiness on its own. You are, in a very real sense, running on a treadmill, expending real effort and real money while staying in essentially the same emotional place. Take a moment and think about a want you finally got, something you were once genuinely excited and eager about. How long did that intense excitement actually last, honestly? For most people, if they are being truly honest, the answer is surprisingly short. Remember this carefully. This research does not mean wants are pointless or that you should never enjoy anything new again. It means something more useful. Understanding that the emotional high from getting a want is often temporary can help you spend more intentionally, investing more in the things connected to lasting well-being, relationships, health, meaning, growth, and less in the endless, exhausting chase for the next temporary emotional spike. Lesson 5. Lifestyle creep when wants quietly become bills. Here is a specific, very practical way the needs versus wants confusion damages people financially over time, often without them even fully noticing it is happening. Listen carefully. Financial researchers call this pattern lifestyle creep, sometimes also called lifestyle inflation. It happens when, as your income increases, your spending quietly increases right alongside it, until things that were once clear luxuries slowly start to feel like completely normal, expected necessities. Another important truth is this: lifestyle creep rarely happens through one single dramatic decision. It happens gradually, one small upgrade at a time. A slightly nicer apartment, a slightly more expensive daily coffee habit, a slightly bigger car payment. Each individual step feels small and completely reasonable in the moment, especially since your income genuinely did increase. But added together, over months and years, these small upgrades can quietly consume your entire additional income, and sometimes even more than that. Think about this carefully, because it explains a confusing pattern many people experience directly. Someone earns significantly more money than they did 5 years ago, and yet, somehow, they do not feel any more financially secure, and sometimes they even feel more financially stressed than before. Why? Because their sense of what counts as a need quietly expanded right alongside their income at almost exactly the same pace, leaving very little actual financial breathing room behind. Another dangerous thing about lifestyle creep is this: it directly connects back to both the hedonic treadmill and social comparison, ideas we already discussed today. A bigger income often means a bigger, more expensive social circle, more expensive expectations, and more products successfully marketed toward your new income bracket. Every piece we have discussed today quietly works together. Comparison creates the want, marketing frames it as a need, and lifestyle creep locks that new spending in permanently as your normal, ongoing baseline. Take a moment and think honestly about your own spending pattern over recent years. Has your income increased at any point? If so, did your sense of what feels necessary expand at roughly the same speed? For many people, being genuinely honest here reveals something important and slightly uncomfortable. Remember this carefully. Avoiding lifestyle creep does not mean refusing every single upgrade forever. That would be an extreme, joyless way to live. It means being intentional, choosing your upgrades consciously and deliberately, instead of allowing your spending to quietly rise on autopilot, disguised the entire time as simple, unavoidable necessity. Lesson 6. The real cost of confusing the two. Let us make everything we have discussed today feel a little less theoretical and a little more real by looking honestly at what this confusion actually costs people in real numbers. Listen carefully to these figures. Recent financial data shows that American households are currently carrying close to $19 trillion in total debt, a number significantly higher than it was just a few years ago. Credit card debt alone sits above $1 trillion, with average interest rates now above 20% on many cards. Nearly half of credit card holders carry a balance from month to month, meaning they are paying real, ongoing interest simply to cover spending they have already done. Another important truth is this, and it may genuinely surprise you. When researchers actually asked people why they were carrying credit card debt, more than half said it was to cover essential expenses, groceries, utilities, healthcare. But remember what we discussed earlier in this video. Lifestyle creep, comparison, and manufactured desire all work quietly, gradually, expanding what feels essential over time. This means some portion of what people now genuinely experience as essential almost certainly includes spending that, a decade earlier, they themselves would have clearly recognized as a want. Think about this carefully. Nearly 2 out of every 5 people surveyed expect their credit card debt to actually grow larger by the end of this year, not shrink. And more than 1 in 5 describe themselves as very stressed specifically about that debt. This is not a small, abstract statistic. This represents millions of real people carrying real, ongoing anxiety, night after night, connected directly to spending decisions, many of which likely began as a want that quietly, gradually, came to feel unavoidable. Another dangerous thing to understand is this. Debt itself is not automatically a moral failure. And this lesson is not about shaming anyone currently struggling financially. Real emergencies happen. Real essential costs rise faster than income sometimes. But understanding today's psychology gives you something valuable, a genuine, practical opportunity to interrupt this pattern before it fully takes hold, rather than only trying to fix it afterward, once real financial pressure has already built up significantly. Take a moment and think about this honestly. If a meaningful portion of your own monthly spending is genuinely going toward true needs, that is simply responsible living, nothing to feel guilty about at all. But if some portion is quietly funding wants that comparison, marketing, or gradual lifestyle creep has convinced you are unavoidable, that is precisely the part worth examining closely, using everything we have discussed today. Remember this carefully. Numbers like these are not meant to create fear. They are meant to create honest motivation, showing clearly that the difference between a need and a want is not simply an interesting philosophical question. It has real, measurable consequences for your stress, your stability, and your future, which makes learning to see that difference clearly one of the most genuinely practical skills you can build. Lesson 7. A simple way to tell the difference. We have covered a lot of real psychology and real history today. Now, let us turn all of it into something genuinely practical, a simple, honest way to check yourself right in the moment before you buy something or before you decide that something has become a true need in your life. Listen carefully to these clear, simple questions. First, would your health, safety, or basic functioning genuinely suffer without this? Be completely honest here. Not dramatic, not exaggerated, genuinely honest. Second, would you still want this exact item if literally nobody else could ever see you owning it? This question quietly reveals how much of the desire is connected to genuine personal value versus how much is connected to comparison or status. Third, will this thing still matter to you in 1 year? Many wants feel intensely urgent in the moment and yet fade completely from memory and importance within just a few weeks. Another important truth is this. A genuinely simple, powerful practice many financial researchers and educators recommend is what is sometimes called a cooling off period. Before making a non-essential purchase, especially a larger one, deliberately wait 24 hours for a smaller decision, perhaps 30 days for a bigger one. If, after that waiting period, you still genuinely want the item, calmly and clearly, without that first urgent emotional rush, that is meaningful, useful information. But very often, that initial urgency quietly fades entirely, revealing that the want was mostly driven by a passing emotion, not a stable, considered desire. Think about this carefully too. It can help enormously to separate your list into 3 honest categories instead of just 2. Needs, the things your basic life and well-being genuinely depend on. Meaningful wants, things that do not qualify as needs, but that align closely with your real values, your health, your relationships, your genuine long-term goals. And impulse wants, things driven mainly by passing comparison, clever marketing, or a brief temporary emotional spike. This third category is usually where the most unnecessary spending and the most regret quietly hides. Another dangerous thing many people do is this. They try to eliminate wants completely, treating every single desire as something shameful or wasteful. This approach rarely lasts very long, and it often creates real, unnecessary suffering. The actual goal here is not eliminating all wants. It is developing clear, honest awareness so that your spending and your energy flow toward the wants that genuinely, meaningfully matter to you, instead of leaking away toward the ones that do not. Take a moment and think about one specific purchase you are currently considering, or have been considering recently. Run it honestly through these simple questions right now. Notice what becomes clearer. Remember this carefully. You do not need a complicated system to make this distinction well. You need a few honest, simple questions and the genuine willingness to pause, even briefly, before your very next decision. Lesson 8. Wanting things is not wrong. Let us end today by being completely clear about something important, because this entire video could easily be misunderstood as an argument against wanting anything at all. That is not the real lesson here. Listen carefully. Wants are not inherently bad, foolish, or shameful. Human beings are naturally drawn toward beauty, comfort, pleasure, achievement, and new experiences. And there is nothing wrong with that at all. Some of life's most meaningful moments, a special trip, a beautiful piece of art, a meaningful celebration, technically began as a want, not a strict basic need. The real problem was never wanting things. The real problem is confusion, mistaking every want for a need, and therefore losing the ability to choose intentionally between them. Another important truth is this. Once you can clearly separate needs from wants, something valuable actually becomes possible. Real, intentional enjoyment. When you buy something as a genuinely chosen want, understood clearly as a want, rather than a manufactured, urgent, false need, you can actually enjoy it more fully, with less underlying anxiety, less quiet resentment, and significantly less regret afterward. Think about this carefully, because it connects every single lesson from today. Understanding Maslow helps you recognize your genuine baseline needs clearly. Understanding Bernays and modern marketing helps you recognize when a want is being deliberately, artificially inflated into something that feels like a need. Understanding Festinger's research helps you notice when comparison, rather than genuine personal desire, is quietly driving your choices. Understanding the hedonic treadmill helps you spend your energy more wisely on things connected to lasting well-being. And understanding lifestyle creep helps you protect your long-term financial and emotional stability, even as your circumstances genuinely improve over time. Another dangerous thing to avoid, in the opposite direction, is this. Do not swing too far the other way and treat every single want as a personal weakness or moral failure. That mindset creates a different but equally real kind of suffering, constant guilt, constant self-denial, and eventually, often, a kind of exhausted rebellion against your own excessive restriction. Balance, not extremes, is the actual sustainable goal here. Take a moment, one final time today, and think about your own relationship with needs and wants. Where has confusion quietly been costing you, financially, emotionally, or simply in terms of your own peace of mind? And where might a little more honest, intentional wanting actually add real, genuine value to your life? Remember this carefully, because it is the true heart of everything we discussed today. Needs deserve to be protected and met without guilt. Wants deserve to be chosen consciously, honestly, and with real enjoyment, instead of arriving disguised, unnoticed, as something they never actually were. If this video helped you understand the difference between needs and wants and helped you practice your English at the same time, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and keep learning with Clara.